So why did you choose this topic?
Well, I've been watching Rhodes Must Fall from Oxford with interest. When I was at Oxford, I did a paper on post-colonial studies and Africa in the era of decolonisation. And it always struck me as remarkable that the building I would go to find the dusty Africa journals was Rhodes' house. And it's not, just a statue of Rhodes. It's a whole building named after Rhodes. He funded it, and it's kind of the centre for the Rhodes Scholars and Africa and the Commonwealth. And I just thought it was fascinating that was the place that if you wanted to study the legacy of empire and colonialism and the kind of struggle for independence of these countries, you have to go to his shrine and sit in his kind of temple. And there are paintings and statues from everywhere. And, and I sit among the Rhodes Scholars who tended to be the other people studying this stuff. And I just thought the whole architecture of his legacy was complicated and really interesting. So when Rhodes Must Fall all these years later, because in my time, I don't feel like there was the confidence amongst students who had the same kind of feelings as I did. We didn't come together. There was no social media. There was no kind of movement. We all just kind of talked about it quietly and in a kind of, slightly embittered way. So I just thought it was fascinating to see this movement grow up and these students now marching in the streets, demonstrating, organising, campaigning, starting petitions, demanding that this be addressed. So that's what first got my interest in it. And it's spread, obviously, because it's been going on in South Africa. It's become a major issue in the States. And I think the specific issue of the colonial legacy in education.
Okay, but so I used to go to Rhodes' house mostly to sleep. It was really nice and cosy.
Really?
Yeah, it had nice big chairs. You could just have a kip in and pretend to work. But I was aware of the irony.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that what's getting lost in this debate, first of all, I wonder, and I'm going to subject you to a few questions, who was Cecil Rhodes, right? Do you know why he's a hate figure? Do you?
Yeah.
What is his biggest crime?
Genocide
of
people, indigenous people in southern Africa. I mean,
but all a bit vague. It was the Matabele by the introduction of blankets laced with smallpox. The famous thing that is largely apocryphal done to the North American indigenous population was done to the Matabele population in what is now southern Zimbabwe by Rhodes. In the Matopos Hills and around Bulawayo. That, first of all. Secondly...
That wasn't the only thing he did.
No, but that was the genocide. Secondly, he did deals particularly with the Matabele. He was very keen. He was convinced there was going to be gold in that region, and subsequently there has been discovered diamonds. Stabbed them in the back. Classic colonial stuff, right? An absolute engine of commercial expansion, an imperialist par excellence, and by any definition, a genocidal murderer, right?
With a racist, white supremacist ideology.
Well,
which wasn't that unusual at the time, but you can't deny that was his...
He wasn't a massive racist in the Hitlerian sense of the word. He didn't kill people because they were black.
No, but he believed in a world order in which white people invaded the African country Imperium. And subjected them
the British Imperium.
To civilization.
Yeah. No, that's the three C's, civilization, Christianity and commerce, being the big driving factors. So I'm not defending the guy. What I find...
And nothing that you've just said about him makes it any less ironic to me that in order to study the legacy of empire, you go to his building.
But the first thing is to, I think, to understand who it is. When people are marching, Rhodes Must Fall, all that kind of stuff, are they aware? I mean, I find it a delicious irony that the legacy of Rhodes, really the enduring legacy of Rhodes, now, thank God, Rhodesia, white supremacy in Rhodesia no longer exists, that the only thing that remains really is a rather lovely building, some comfortable chairs, and an international scholarship for whom the principal beneficiaries are the sons and daughters of the colonial descendants of people like Cecil Rhodes, who are now campaigning, no doubt, for the removal of his statue and so on.
It's so complicated, Sam. I think, and I'm not in any way saying that I wish the Rhodes Scholarship Programme didn't exist, but the problem with this is it's not ancient history. So, okay, white supremacy is no longer the official regime in Zambia and Zimbabwe, but it's not that long ago. It's in my lifetime that Ian Smith was still the premier. And when I was at Oxford, I had friends who were Rhodes Scholars, and I made friends with a white South African guy who was a Rhodes Scholar. We were both doing PPE, we studied in the library together, really nice guy, we just really got along. He invited me to his birthday drinks one summer at a pub by the river. And I went down there, and it was one of my university experiences that really stands out, because I had lots of friends who were Rhodes and Marshall scholars, and, you know, they were from all over the world, and they were all races. And I went to this white South African Rhodes scholars drinks, and I got there, and it was literally, you know those scenes in those westerns where someone enters a saloon and you can hear a pin drop?
Star Wars
The
bar.
whole place went silent, literally. And it was the most uncomfortable moment of my university life. And I realised when I looked at them, it was all the white Rhodes scholars. Literally, there was not a single black Rhodes scholar, there was not a single black person. And that's why when I came in, it was almost like I'd broken this unspoken rule, which I was completely oblivious of. He was just my friend.
Okay, so
and from that, I got more of an awareness that even within the Rhodes scheme, that legacy of racism and separation and insecurity and prejudice and, you know, and all of these things. And I'm not saying that Rhodes scholars are racist.
But what would you do with the... So what do you do then? You've got the resource. I mean, you could talk about... What troubles me in this whole debate is not, you know, let's take a more... If you had Hitler College at Oxford and a statue of Hitler, there wouldn't be any debate about
this. That's why I think this is a great development, and it's not because there's a simple answer. But the reason what
would you do with the money?
The reason I retell that story is because I think that as a black student at Oxford or any elite educational establishment, that is one of the many layers of
disadvantage. Were you wearing a poncho or something weird? Maybe it was what you were wearing.
I was not wearing anything weird, Sam, but I love the attempt to find another explanation. And there are lots of things, you know, we would get ID'd when we went into colleges. You know, if I went into a college with one or more black friends at Oxford, we would be asked for our university cards when no one else did. One time my boyfriend came to visit me at my college, and the porters said, next time you have someone who looks like a criminal coming, you need to let us know in advance. And they detained him outside. They wouldn't let him in until I came down. And it's just those kind of little acts of microaggression that make you feel that you're in a place that is not set up for you. Now, I'm not saying that's a reason not to go, and I'm not saying it's not something you can overcome, but as a black student, you know, as a university student, you already feel insecure. You know, you're under pressure. Everybody's questioning whether they're smart enough or whether they're going to make it, and everyone thinks everyone else is better than them. There are so many pressures, and on top of that, to feel the kind of illegitimacy that you don't.
What would you do? So you know, continuing to have a monument to somebody who I know was responsible for genocide of the Ndebele in what is now southern Zimbabwe. I have no problem with removing the statue. I think it's very strange that you know, you've still got Rhodes University in South Africa. So you've got this legacy. It needs sorting out. How would you rename it, and what would you do with the money? Because I don't think anybody sensible would argue, once you know the history of Cecil Rhodes.
That's secondary, because the issue at the moment, there's not even a consensus that there's anything wrong with the legacy, and that's what I think is useful about this. It's acknowledging.
I'm acknowledging that.
But you acknowledge that. You acknowledge that. But Chris Patton, the former vice chancellor, when this whole movement really gained momentum, said, if you've got a problem with history, you shouldn't be studying here in the first place. I mean, that was his response.
Well, there is an issue about sort of year zeroing history. We didn't get onto it, but, you know, renaming Imperial College. You can't pretend that there wasn't a British Imperium, and it had some positive aspects, but if you were a victim of the British Imperial effort, it certainly didn't look like it. Now, from my perspective, I would like people to study British imperial history so that you learn what it's like to be at the bottom of the pile.
That would be a good start.
Because that is a really, really crappy place to be.
That would be a good start.
And you need to defend against other people's imperiums.
It's ironic that we're talking about rewriting history, because the current curriculum has rewritten it in favour of an imperialist, British, supremacist narrative. So for me, if you want to talk about honesty in the curriculum, you need to start reanalyzing the subjects of the people that are excluded from the historical narrative, even though they made such significant contributions. You know, the figures that have been elevated despite the fact that they committed atrocities that are never talked about. I mean, UCL recently renamed a building after a famous eugenicist. You know, without any acknowledgement of what his legacy was, and things like that
recently
happened
renamed it
last year. And it's incredible that these things are still happening without being challenged. And that's what I think is the best thing about the Rhodes Must Fall movement. It's not that I'm saying that you should wipe out the Rhodes Scholarship and get rid of all the funding. It's not I'm saying you should knock down Imperial and start all over again. I just think that we are at such a low level of recognition about the truth in our history that just acknowledging it,
but isn't that
just
also,
acknowledging it is
I
an
agree
important
with you.
first
Okay,
step.
I accept all of what you've said, and because I know a lot about Cecil Rhodes. But then a little part of me just think this is another bunch of whining students wanting to go off into the comfort room and be protected from scary witches and Macbeth. And I think that is part of what has undermined the whole debate, is that whilst in this case there is an absolutely justified theology, if you like, behind it all, students are just such prats.